Have you ever wondered why some business people are more successful than others? Welcome to the Mentor List, a source of sound advice with your host, David Lewis. The Mentor List specialises in interviews with top business minds. Listen to their stories, list their habits, and most importantly, gather their advice for your career. This is the Mentor List.
Hi, welcome to the show. Today we're having a chat with Jo Mikleus. Jo has more than 25 years experience in banking and business. She was most recently the head of global subsidiaries at ANZ and was responsible for the bank's largest multinational clients doing business here in Australia. In addition to her executive role, she has been also a director on the board of ANZ Bank Vietnam. Jo was the ANZ Bank Chief of Staff to CEO Mike Smith, overseeing Mike's involvement in external activities such as the B20, FSI, IIF and Male Champions of Change. Internally, she drove the CEO's strategic priorities, development of the bank's social media strategy, and also oversaw the development of ANZ's market-leading flexibility, diversity and inclusions policies. She travelled to Silicon Valley on 2 occasions with the board and management board to keep abreast of innovation and inform the bank's response to digital disruption. She's on the Melbourne 4.0 task force, helping Greater Melbourne prepare, act and embrace the accelerating speed of innovation and disruption. Jo has a Bachelor of Social Science, from the University of New South Wales and is a graduate of the Australian Institute of Company Directors. So we're quite lucky to have caught Jo in what she describes as a transitional time in her career after recently leaving a job and company that she has grown to love over time. So exciting times ahead for Jo, and I hope you enjoy today's conversation with Jo Mikleus. Jo Mikleus, welcome to the Mentor List.
Thanks for the invitation, David.
No worries. Thanks for coming in today and for your time. And I know I'm just really eager to hear your story and listen in on all your banking experience and other experiences and recent experience and looking for high profile roles. So I guess the first question is, do you want to, or not the first question, but our standard question is, do you want to tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Okay, well, my career so far spans 26 years and I've enjoyed broad experience and seniority. While I've been in the financial services game, I guess all of this time, and in fact I've only worked for ANZ all of this time, I actually don't really see myself as a hardcore banker. I'm not saying that I don't understand banking. I do, and in fact I understand the breadth and depth of banking better than most. However, there are probably 3 reasons, David, where I don't identify as just being a banker, because I suppose firstly, the breadth of businesses that I've run. Secondly, the unique skills I've acquired due to a couple of exceptional roles that I've had. And the third is the innovation exposure that I've had, particularly in the last 7 years or so. So perhaps I should explain in a little bit more detail? Yeah,
sure. It's sort of all things that sort of, I guess, you've picked up or exposure you've had that's not really industry specific.
Correct, and quite portable, I guess,
Tell us, let's go into it.
All right, well, so my core capability is an all-round business leader. The bulk of my experience has been in building teams, reshaping teams, or getting teams to perform at the highest possible level that they can. And by doing that, having a positive impact on profitability. The teams that I've led have been up to about 350 people or contributing profit of about 300 million.
Wow. So they're like, businesses in their own right.
They are businesses in their own right. But I guess what makes me unusual to other leaders in the banking industry is that these leadership roles have been in very different forms of banking. So from your mum and dad retail banking to banking of wealthy individuals to banking small and medium-sized businesses. And then also my last role was banking to the big corporations at the top end of town, which is called institutional banking. And I've also, in addition to those kind of customer-facing roles, I've also led teams in other parts of the bank, such as running a contact centre or running a central marketing team. So I'm more of a generalist business leader than a specialist business leader. And in each of these big leadership roles, I've been able to build or reshape the teams by getting the staff to focus on the customer and make sure that staff engagement is high. And I've really introduced a purposeful discipline to set a high performance bar for the teams. And the other thing I think I do well is that I'm able to scan the external environment, like economic conditions or market trends or innovation, and make tweaks to the way the business is functioning in response. And that way I can optimize performance and profitability.
So it's not just I don't know if you've heard this old saying, the 363, lend out, no, take savings at 3%, lend out at 6%, and you're on the golf green by 3.
No, it's all about thinking about the customer and how to optimize the business, using the best people and capability. So the second big reason I think of myself as an all-rounder rather than a banker is that there are a couple of roles that I've done which have been very distinctive or unique. The first one is that I was the Chief of Staff to ANZ's global CEO, Mike Smith. And the second is that I served on the board of ANZ's wholly owned subsidiary in Vietnam. And it was really in these roles that I built a very strong skill set around navigating and influencing and collaborating in very complex stakeholder situations. So outside of the bank, in those roles, I built relationships with the most senior levels in business. So, top tier CEOs, top tier company directors, ambassadors, high net worth individuals, relationships that I've been able to maintain to this day. Inside of the bank, I was involved and across everything. So from board meetings to strategy to talent and succession planning to mergers and acquisitions to preparing for annual results and investor discussions, and I could go on and on. Then I think the interactions that I had with the board and also being on the Vietnam board, I learned the different mindset that you need to be a top executive versus the mindset you need to be a top company director. So that's quite distinctive. And these two roles also gave me a global perspective. In fact, I met with staff and customers and regulators, media, government. So ANZ's in 34 countries. I went to 28 countries in 2.5 years, and many of those countries I visited multiple times. So it really does give you an immersion into international business at the highest possible levels, and truly unique, as I said. And I guess the final big reason why I'm more of an all-rounder is because of my exposure to disruptive innovation. So clearly, to succeed as a leader, I had to lead my own teams through the cultural journey necessary to embrace change and innovation. And I did that successfully, or at least in a material way, I guess, over the last 4 roles that I've had. But I was also part of a couple of fact-finding trips to Silicon Valley with the board, learning firsthand what disruption was coming to Australia, how other fast-growing companies were operating, and how ANZ should formulate its own strategic response. And then since leaving the bank, I've been involved with the Committee for Melbourne's 4.0 task force and helping them to think through how the city of Greater Melbourne should prepare and embrace the accelerating speed of innovation and disruption. So thinking about that in a city context rather than, running a business or a bank. So 26 years, been a long time, and I've gathered really quite a kit bag of skills, and I've really had to learn how to be agile and adaptive in different situations and obviously be a high performer, because you don't get promoted obviously without being a high performer. But I guess my only problem with all of that is that my experience was all with just one organisation. And I had been curious for quite some time about how I could apply my skills in other settings. So last year was an interesting year, and after some deep soul searching, I made the bold move to step outside the comfort of the organisation that I loved and that loved me, and, back myself and my capabilities and experience into an arena that will be outside of banking. So, so that's...
And here you are, and now you're available for coming on the show. And
correct.
So just before we sort of talk through, I guess, the aftermath of the bank, I just wanted to go back and...
Sure.
So just, what was Mike Smith like to work with? He's obviously got a very big public profile. Now, what was the guy like? You're dealing with him on a day-to-day basis, and I imagine it's some pretty tense times and fun times here and there.
Yeah, absolutely. So to your last point, he's absolutely a fun guy, likes to have fun, but, it's a serious business being the CEO of a top 3 ASX listed company. And so my role as Chief of Staff is a serious role as well. So, the standards are, relentlessly high and unforgivingly high, but I guess that's the nature of the beast. He was, an incredibly knowledgeable banker and probably the most connected, relationship guy that I've ever met. So we would often go to a place like Hong Kong or China or somewhere else in the world, and we'd be meeting with billionaires that most people don't get access to, and they would be embracing Mike, and I'd ask him afterwards, how did you get to know this person, or how did you build up a relationship? And he would talk about relationships built over 30 years of kind of intersecting with each other at various points of their respective careers. But he had the discipline to maintain those relationships and those networks. And I guess it really came through in that pinnacle role of being a CEO of a multinational bank.
Yeah, wow, okay. So things he started 30 years ago is sort of, paying off now in terms of networking. And
well, I guess he backed the intuition of, here's this government official that I had to meet, and they were junior, I was a junior banker, they're a junior government official. You kind of get a bit of an instinct that there's something quality about that person, and the two of them got promoted through the years, maintained contact, and voila, CEO versus head of state, for example. Wow. So seems so easy, doesn't it? But it requires a lot of discipline. So
yeah, definitely. Did he share any of those disciplines with you, or is it just completely random that they remember, or are they, is he structured, or?
No, he's definitely got some structure about it, but then also opportunistic. If you're in country and, you tend to look up the people who, are there and are in your contacts or whatever. Yep.
Wow. Okay, so 28 different countries you said you visited.
I have been to 28 countries.
This is over
2.5 years.
Okay, so is that sort of with Mike, or so you're basically on a world tour?
Well, it's kind of juggling everything, because as I said at the outset, you kind of across everything while juggling being on the road, or, you've got board meetings happening and that kind of thing. So it's a very multi-dimensional role. And you very quickly work out where to go deep and where you can kind of, because you can't go deep on everything. So you built up a good instinct about what to make sure is right. And where you can kind of rely on experts.
And I imagine being that mobile, because I really like coming in, having routine, but if you're travelling that much, that sort of gets a bit disrupted. So how did you find being on the road so much, and how did that affect your routine and, I guess, being able to perform the role?
Well, it was just part of the role. So I guess from a personal perspective, I've got a family, a husband and 3 children, so it was absolutely a family decision for me to take this role, because frankly, when I was on the road, everybody back home had to step up. They had to fill the gap of maybe the jobs that I was doing, or dropping people off or whatever. So it's absolutely a family decision. So that's number one. And secondly, you just adjust to the routine not being a routine. So there are some things that are relatively predictable, like, board meeting on a Monday morning. If we're in country, the planning cycle. You have a bit of a cycle in the CEO role. You have a bit of a cycle to your year around the annual results because you've got to report to investors and, there's media around that and so forth. So there is a bit of a cycle to the year. But then other than that, you've probably got to view a year to a year and a half in advance at a high level where you're going to be, what you're going to be doing. And you need to do that to be strategic about it because otherwise you kind of get pulled in lots of different directions. So the art of this role is really to keep the CEO strategic and not get him sucked into the detail.
The urgent stuff, whatever that is. So you mentioned family before, and so we were chatting before we started recording, I guess, to balance that out with, getting the family to step up. And you were mentioning a story when you were in the branches and you actually had your baby with you. So this is sort of obviously, I guess, the opposite to what you've gone through there. Yeah, do you want to talk through that move and how that sort of integrated family and the decision?
Yeah, so my life, if you like, with ANZ has not been continuous, and I did have a break when I was having children, but I was asked to come back when I was 7 months pregnant with my third child, and I guess after we got over the fact that I was 7 months pregnant and about to have a baby, my boss at the time was really forward-thinking in his approach, and what we agreed was that I would come to work with my son 2 days a week and I would work from home 2 days a week. And so Tom came to work with me for the first 5 months of his life, and thankfully he was a good sleeper, so I was able to be quite productive. But, that was, well, he's 14 and a half now, so that was almost 15 years ago, and it was flexibility in its very earliest form. And so I was a bit of a role model for flexibility in the bank.
Because ANZ's really known now for, their flexibility and supporting, in particular women and women of industry and women in banking. And
absolutely, yep. And men who want to be flexible as well.
Yes, yeah, of course. Don't forget about the guys.
No.
Cool, okay. There was one other thing which I had to ask you about. It's not really related to anything we used to talk about, but it's an amphibious vehicle. You told me the story of that. Can we share that? Because it's just something I just remembered from our chat.
What would you like to know about the amphibious vehicle?
Well, could you tell me about how you went on it and
Well, yeah,
it's
sure.
not related to anything. It's just really interesting that.
Well, so there's this New Zealand company who have created an amphibious boat. Yes. And Mike happens to own one of these boats, and it's amazing. And I've been on his boat. So basically you drive it out of the garage, drive it down to the water, and then you drive it in the water and then you kind of zoom off. It's unbelievable. But this is created by a New Zealand company. Yeah. And, they're exporting into Australia, and, it's just one of those. I mean, there's such interesting businesses in Australia and New Zealand, and it's just, I think it's amazing.
One of the perks, I guess, of, the CEO role, where you can have, you can take your amphibious vehicle out on the weekend if you're in town, I guess. I just thought that we'd share that. I just couldn't let you get away without sharing it.
Yes, thank you, David.
No, sorry. So let's get back to your story. Okay, so 26 years in the bank, but you're not a banker. So let's talk about, that's a huge decision, and maybe talk through. I know you sort of touched on it briefly, but, where you are now. I mean, I can only imagine it would have been quite nervous decision to make going into this, unknown territory.
Yeah, so it's a lot to think through, I suppose, because, it's not just me, I'm an integral part of our family. So it's not a decision that I took lightly. So it was the end of last year that I finished with ANZ, and I think the technical term of what I'm doing now is in transition. But look, David, I'm not sure what I imagined this period to be like, but I'm actually having the most empowering conversations with people that I admire and respect. So I'm reaching out to my network that I've built, over this time. and I'm generating job opportunities for myself, and I'm looking for CEO roles and also to complement with a company directorship if I can. And yes, it's been an unexpected and wonderful experience, I think. I'd have to qualify that to say on most days, because not every day is, sunshine and rainbows, but
it's almost like a confidence thing too. You're kind of vulnerable a bit as well.
You definitely have to have confidence to back yourself, particularly if it's a decision that you've made rather than have the decision made for you. But, I don't think, while I've had a really great career at ANZ, I suppose, in some ways you kind of get a little bit shepherded into roles because it's dependent on roles being available. You've got a good sponsor as a line manager. There's a lot of variables, and you end up sometimes in roles that perhaps were not part of your career plan. I never had a career plan, but, you might not have imagined yourself to be in. So now I'm kind of doing some blue sky thinking about what it is that I want to achieve, in the next 26 years.
Yeah, great. And I guess, are you finding that it moves quite slow now that you're out of, I guess?
Yeah. So I do like a bit of pace, and so that's probably one of the development areas that I've had to overcome in this period, is that you're not in control of the timetable. So, you need to learn patience. You need to appreciate the other side. There's busy chair people or recruiters and so forth that, are juggling lots of different activities. So I think to appreciate that. And that's in some ways why I got involved with the Committee for Melbourne 4.0 Task Force. There's a bit of a sideline activity for me to break away from networking and kind of job hunting activities.
You mentioned before as well about how your leads are not necessarily coming from where you thought your leads might be. Or
Totally. Yeah. You could be having a conversation with somebody. The meeting could have been set up for one purpose, but then you have the opportunity to talk to them about what it is that you want to do. And then all of a sudden, a light goes on, they connect you with another person, or give you some ideas or some leads, and you kind of, I'm actually finding it really fascinating, the paths that I've been sent down just through talking to people.
Yeah, wow. It's, like the power of focus. It's just, you're seeing it everywhere.
Yeah. And it does help when you're quite clear on what it is that you want to do. I think when I started having conversations with people, I wasn't really quite sure what it was that I wanted to do, and that makes it difficult for people to help you. Yeah. So if you're quite clear in what it is that you want, people will absolutely help you.
And how have you found this clarity? Was this before you've left the bank, or is this sort of this process you've gone through?
It's been a bit of a process, I must say. I was sitting on the fence a little bit to start with. I wasn't sure whether I was going to get out of financial services or stay in. I wasn't sure if I was mobile or not. So, through the last few months, I've really been able to think through whether I'm mobile. Well, I'm not mobile at the moment, so and yeah. And look, I had a couple of opportunities with other banks, and I got progressed through the interview process, and I actually sat back and thought to myself, actually, this is just more of the same of what I've already done before. And so sometimes it takes a process and you get down a road for you to realise that it's not actually what you want to do. So
there's probably not the kind of growth personally you'd get.
Personal growth, yeah, absolutely. I mean, great roles, number of people, or size of balance sheet, those kind of things. But yeah, I'm looking for personal growth and satisfaction.
Would be hard. I'm just thinking, chief of staff role, because you're so involved in everything at that level. I mean, it'd be hard to step back into a BAU type director role in a bank and not feel like you're missing out on some of the fun, or it must have been a really exciting role, and one that'd be hard to sort of replace.
Very hard to replicate. I think going in, I always knew that it was, a 2 to 3 year gig. So number one, you always know that you're going to get a window into something that you're going to have to move away from. But it's still brutal when you go back into, more of a BAU type role. Yeah. It's an adjustment.
So just some of the habits that you found sort of, in your time at ANZ or personally that have contributed to, landing, this career of success and these roles that have ended up being massive.
I guess some of the things that I've done is, you always come across roadblocks along the way where, somebody more senior than you thinks you're not ready for a promotion, or, maybe you won't be suited to this area of the organisation. And I think that, if you really are confident about your capability and your experience, and you've got other people as well telling you, sponsors and supporters telling you that, just like a watercourse, there are other ways around the roadblock. Yeah. So, I mentioned that I had done a marketing role, and I got that role because I got knocked back not from a promotion, but being considered to even apply for a promotion. I was told that I'd have to do my time. This is in the early 90s. And, I guess I felt I'd already done my time, and I'd built up some great capability, great customer experience, great credit experience. And I thought to myself, well, maybe I should look around and see what else is on offer. And the marketing role was there. And that was my first people leadership role at the age of 23. And I really got a taste for what it would be like. And that's where my passion started for people leadership, actually. So I'm really grateful that I got that roadblock, was able to find another way around. I think, having a good boss is always a good strategy.
Yep.
So,
and what if you don't? Did you have any? It sounds like you had one, which was obviously telling you to stay in the role. But was there others?
Sure, you kind of come across bosses from time to time that are not that great.
Out them.
No. But where I've been put into unusual situations or been particularly backed, it's been because I've had the backing of a boss. So they become your sponsor. They coach you, they guide you, they tend to be the ones that you stay in contact with after you're not working for them anymore. They also tend to be the ones that really feel like they have done the right thing by having their employees get promoted. So they don't think of it in a hierarchy sense. They think of it as a developing people sense. One of my other strategies, I think, and it's really coming to the fore right now, is the power of your networks. Yeah. And I think everybody at some point in their career gets so immersed in the job at hand that sometimes you neglect your network.
External or internal?
Both.
Yeah.
But particularly external. Yeah. So, making sure you build networks, number one, but you nurture them, number two, and then don't be afraid to lean into them, number three, when you need to. Because even if you haven't seen someone for a year or 2 years, everybody is busy, and that's kind of well recognised. But, people like to help.
So how do you sort of, when you say nurture them, what is that, a text message here and there, or?
Yeah, it could be a text message or an email, out to lunch, or even in a group situation. Make sure if you know that you're going to an event that, that they're going to seek people out and have a good conversation with them.
Great, yeah. All right, thanks for sharing it. So I was kind of segueing into advice, especially when you said, around the roadblocks. But do you have any advice that you would have liked to receive or you'd give yourself as you were coming through?
There's something I learned actually in that period where I took a break and was having children that I've really applied as a leader. I'm a hardworking person, very resourceful, reasonably resilient, and also quite independent. And I think those strengths, I overplayed those strengths when I was having children. So the way that played out is, I was juggling 3 babies, basically, working part-time, had a husband who had a long commute, and, I rarely asked for help. And when I was offered help, I never took it. So I can't even believe now that I'm saying these things that I was in that place, I must have been mad. But nobody's got a cape on their shoulders. There's no superheroes out here. And I think to be a great parent and to be a great leader, you need to seek support and you need to allow yourself to be supported. So I'm really grateful in a way that I learned that at that time, because I've been able to apply that as I've gotten bigger and bigger leadership roles.
Yeah. You definitely can't do everything yourself. I mean,
I don't know what I was thinking.
And so how did you so I guess, is it just through, I guess, wearing down over time that you're trying to do everything? And like, how did you come to that realization?
Yeah, I think I did wear myself down and I was tired. I was grumpy. I didn't like, how I didn't like how I was presenting. So.
And just sort of, a few of the other standard mentor list questions around, was there a quote that you think of to share with the listeners?
Yeah, so I've got one that's on my computer. I put a little Post-it note on my computer at home and I put it on there not long after I left ANZ, and it's a quote from the author Malcolm Gladwell. And the quote is, "Nothing of consequence gets accomplished without courage." And I like it because of the many things that I've done, and I've had to have courage to, bring my son with me to work, to relocate the whole family to regional Australia, to embrace some of the unknown and take jobs where I might only be 50% qualified for. So I think that's quite reflective of the things that I've done in the past. But I think more importantly, and the reason why it's probably on my computer, is that it is inspiring me as to what the future is going to look like. So I don't really have a desire to be average. Yeah. So this quote really reinforces to me that if I'm going to achieve something of consequence, I actually need to have the courage to back myself to be different.
Yeah, great. And what a handy thing to, I guess, read every day or whenever you're at the PC.
And if I'm having a bad day or a knockback or whatever, I can go back and think about the big picture and what it is, what's the end goal I'm going for here.
Because it is, it's a tough part of the market just from a numbers perspective. If you're looking at, let's say, ASX-listed CEO roles, there's only so many ASX-listed companies, and then there's only so many that are of a certain size and significance. So, from a numbers perspective, it's the top end of town. So they're not.
It's a numbers game, and it's almost like a dating game as well, right? So there are roles that I've knocked back, and the reasons I've knocked them back is maybe the culture wasn't right, or it could be a number of different reasons. So this is about me wanting to be in the organisation, but it's also about the organisation choosing me. So sometimes it's only a one-way relationship, just like dating, and it never lasts. And you certainly don't want to get into bed with the first date that you're having. It might end badly. So, and, I need to think about my own personal brand in all of this. And so I'm wanting to choose quite wisely. And so that means I need to be patient and wait for the right opportunity.
Yeah, that's very, very true. Wow. Because you mentioned that before around starting to build that patience. And, when you're out of the machine, you realise just how slowly things really work. Sometimes when you're in the big corporates, it's, you don't notice. But, okay, so thanks for sharing that. So is there a book that you recommend people pick up and have a read, or other materials? Or
Well, I'm not actually a big novel reader. I'm actually much better consuming new information on social media or podcasts. Like, I listen to the Mentor List every week, David.
Oh, good to hear.
Anyway, I'm not quite sure how I got onto the Mentor List, but anyway.
Don't worry about
that. Having said that, so when I left the bank, a former EA of mine took me out for a coffee and gave me a book as a gift, and I've really loved reading it. And the book is called Daring and Disruptive by Lisa Messenger, and it's the story of an inspirational entrepreneur and her roller coaster ride of creating a sustainable business. So, as you read through the book, you can feel her inner desire to succeed and really create something that should be impossible. She's making the impossible possible. And I like it because She tells her story from the heart. She's an Australian, so I love to celebrate Australian leadership, and quite frankly, I think she's a role model for what can be achieved if you stay on purpose and back yourself.
Great. Well, it's a good one to read in your situation as well.
Yeah, my EA knew me very well, clearly.
Definitely. I hope you're keeping that network nice and warm.
Absolutely.
Good to hear. So I guess that's probably a nice segue into, how people might go about contacting you. So if there's a chairman of the board that listen in, so they're our target audience here on the mentor list.
Oh, great. Well, that was a good tick decision to go on this podcast.
So, I guess so if people are listening in, they love what you're saying, they want to get in contact with you, how would they go about doing that?
I think the easiest way is via LinkedIn, and I'm there under Joe Mikleus. I'm also on Twitter, an active tweeter on most days. So that'd probably be the best two ways, and I do accept all the invitations that come my way. So
sounds good. All right. Well, thank you again for coming in. I know I've got you at a good time because as soon as you get that new role, it'll be like, Dave, who? Oh, sorry, got no time.
I don't think so. You're an important part of my network, Dave.
Keep it warm.
Yes, that's right.
But thanks again for coming in today, and appreciate your time. And for everyone listening in, we'll see you again for another great show next week.
Thank you for listening to The Mentor List with your host, David Lewis. If you like what you're hearing on The Mentor List, the best way to support the show is to take just a few seconds to leave a rating and comment over on iTunes. You can also find further information about this show and links to further episodes at www.mentorlist.com.au. Until next time, this is The Mentor List.